Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Mark, for a wonderful introduction. Golly, of all these things that's been said, I hope I can live up to part of them. I never come up here, but what I get to thinking, I probably know how Zsa Zsa Gabor's fifth husband might have felt. I know what I'm supposed to do, I'm just not sure I can make it interesting. But I am Buttermilk Smith, and I'm an alcoholic. I don't look like an alcoholic, but I am one. I don't reckon I do. I've been told a lot of times that I didn't look like an alcoholic. But they never did anybody tell me what they're supposed to look like. But certainly want to take this time to thank you people for your hospitality and the fruit basket and for inviting us over in the first place. I hardly ever get invited back after I've been a place. But I am Buttermilk and I'm an alcoholic, and most people say I tell a story to relax the audience. And you people look pretty well relaxed to me, so I'm going to tell a story to try to relax Buttermilk. And I don't know whether this is a good story or I've just fell in love with the way I tell it. But I heard about this old 84-year-old man went for a walk uptown one day, and he's walking around looking at them high-rise buildings and things, and he seen a sign that said sperm bank. Oh boy, he said, this is what I need. So he went in, and he said, girlie, I'd like to donate to this. Oh, she said, old timer, I don't think you're capable, and why would you want to? Well, he said, I once had a boy, and said he went off to the war and got all shot up, and come back and later got to drinking, later died. And said, I just think some of my blood should be left. It's a good line, you know. Well, she said, if you think you're capable, and she handed him a little fruit jar and said, you go in that little room and bring me a specimen. So more customers come in, and she got busy. About 20 minutes later, she thought, oh my God, that old man's still in there. And she went over and jerked the door open, and he was just completely exhausted. Oh, he said, girl, I'm glad to see you. He said, I tried it with my right hand. He said, I tried it with my left hand. I held it between the knees and tried it with both hands. I've run hot water on it. I've run cold water on it. And I cannot get the lid off of this damn jar. Thank you, I needed that. Well, I grew up down here in the edge of Arkansas back during the Depression days. And if you ain't never been through Arkansas during the Depression, you haven't lived. And the whole roll of preachers was thicker than the fiddlers. They were preaching under bridges and in schoolhouse, anywhere they could get to preach. There's a preach in the NRA and the Blue Eagle and the End of Time and Hell's Fire and Brimstone. And they kept me scared to death till I was grown, and because I didn't know what might be going to happen. And they was telling about this beast that come through that had all them heads and horns. And I was plowing tomatoes right next to a wooded pasture, and there's a deer come out of there one day, and I like to run my team to death. And I'd go to the house for dinner. I'd eat just as quick as I could and then crawl up in the manger and nap. If I went to the house, they was all talking about this stuff, you know. It had me pretty well worked up. And I had a brother that got into this preaching business. I don't know how he come to preach. He didn't have any education at all, but he finally read the Bible and turned out to be a pretty good preacher. And he was always telling us funny things that happened in the preaching days. And he said he was a preacher. He said every community has got two of them little old ladies, they call them. Used to call them old maids, but I think now they call them, I don't know what to call them, little old ladies, I reckon. And he said he had a couple of them in his congregation, and one Sunday morning after the services, he decided he'd get ready and go visit them that afternoon. And so he went down and knocked on the door, and one of the old ladies come to the door and said, "Well, Brother Smith, it's a pleasure to see you. Come in." And he went in and sat down on the van, and she said, "We'll fix some refreshments and we'll be out in a few minutes." And there's a saucer there full of peanuts, and he just reached and got him a handful of peanuts and started eating them. After a while, they come back in and said, "Well, I see you found the peanuts." "Oh, yeah," he said, "I just love the things. I apologize for eating up your peanuts." "Oh," they said, "don't think nothing about it." Said, "We don't either one have any teeth, and we buy them peanut clusters and suck the chocolate off of them and just put the peanuts in that jar." Thank you. And he just about to get over that, and he looked around, and up on the piano sat a glass of water, and it had a condom floating in it. Oh, he said, "My God, what have I got into now?" Studied this as long as he could, and he said, "Now, ladies, I've just got to ask you, what is the idea of that thing up there?" "Well," she said, "Brother Smith, we really don't know." He said, "We found that in the parking lot, and the label on it said, 'Place on organ for prevention of diseases.'" And he said, "We didn't have an organ, so we just put it on the piano." And said, "We ain't either one had a cold all winter." Well, I don't know where to go from here, but I was raised down there in them hills back during the Depression, and I stayed down there till I got about grown, and I hitchhiked out of there, and I come over here to Bartlesville, and I got a job in that old zinc smelter. And that old humpback boss said, "Now, if you can do this work," said, "it pays $4.81 a day." And I said, "Lord God, man, consider it done. I never had heard of anybody making that kind of money." So I went to work, and I've always been a fellow that set goals and never did meet any, but I set them. And I thought, now, if I can work here 3 years of making this kind of money, I can go back to Arkansas and build a better town than Cincinnati and run it like it ought to be run. But it seemed like nothing happened the way I planned it. About the first payday I got, I bought me a suit of clothes. Never had a suit. About the next payday, I bought me a pair of them Bronx Stompers boots. About the next payday, I got me a Stetson hat. And then about the next payday, I discovered girls. And I got engaged to 3 of them at the same time. And you talk about a hillbilly getting an overdrive, I took off. But my money just wasn't accumulating. It wasn't doing any good at all. So I wrote to this brother, the preaching brother. Now, he didn't drink as a rule. As a habit, he drank a little, but not as a rule. And I wrote to him and told him how well I was doing. So I used to say he sold out and come out there, but as I get a little more honest, he just come out there. He didn't have anything to sell. But he too got a job at the smelter. And he too got him a pair of boots and a hat. And we saved up a little money and bought a Model A Ford. Then we saved a little more money and decided we'd go down in the hills and visit the folks. So we went down and visited everybody around, told them if they needed anything, just write to us. And we were riding around down them hills about as drunk as a couple of fellas supposed to stay the year around. And we got to talking about bacon. We was paying 20 cents a pound for bacon out there at Bartlesville. And we never had paid for any bacon. If we run out of meat, we just killed a hog. Didn't make no difference whose it was. They run outside anyway. So we rambled up on a bunch of them old hogs bedded down in the road. And we just jumped out and cornered us about 150-pound shoat up in the corner of a rail fence and caught him and throwed him in the back seat of that A model and headed for Bartlesville. Well, we had coming along over there between Salina and Pryor, and the old, what is the name of the road? I forgot. Anyhow, it's about halfway between Pryor and Salina, between sundown and dark. And I looked up, and there's one of them Holstein cars backed in there stopping everybody. And I looked at Jim, and I said, we might be in trouble. And I looked back at that hog, and he'd kind of got leaned up in the back seat like he's one of us. And I just pulled off my hat and put on the hog. And we pulled up and stopped, and that patrolman throwed that flashlight on me and said, what's your name? I said, Buttermilk Smith. Throwed it on my brother and said, what's your name? He said, Jim Smith. Throwed it back on that hog with my hat on and said, what's your name? I jobbed that old hog with my thumbnail, and he said, oink. Well, he said, go ahead, and he's walking back over to the car where this other patrolman was. He said, I'll tell you right now, they ain't none of them Smiths very good looking, but that damned old oink's the ugliest man I ever seen in my life. Thank you. Well, I stayed there and worked at the smelter for about 3 years and left broke. And a lot of things happened to me while I was at the smelter. We had an old bathhouse over there. About 400 of us took showers in there every morning. And all of my life I'd been taught that all men were created equal. And they damn sure ain't. But anyhow, I got to having asthma. I had the asthma when I was a kid, but I come out there and kind of got over it for 2 or 3 years. But I started having it again, and the doctor said I'd have to change climates. And the sheriff had been trying to get me to do that for years. But so I went to Southern California. Well, I'd been back to Arkansas and married one of them hillbilly girls. And I had a wife and baby by that time. And so I went to Southern Cal. And I didn't fit in out there at that time. Now later on I would have fit in, but I didn't at that time. I never had been around any of them so-called winos. And they are a breed of their own, you know. And I'd got up early one morning and started work somewhere, and it was before daylight. And I met one of these guys coming just as hard as he could walk. And he just walked up and started talking to me. And we talked a few minutes, and he said, well, I'd better go. And he wheeled around and took off, and he got about 10 steps. He said, hey. I said, yeah, what? He said, which way was I going when I met you? And I told him, and he went on. Now, I later knew about that, but I didn't at that time. Well, I didn't stay out there very long. I come back over here to Topeka, Kansas, excuse me, Every time I come up here, my nose starts running and my feet start smelling. They're just mixed up all the time. But anyhow, I come back over here to Topeka, Kansas, and hired out to go up on the Alcan Highway. And I took my wife and baby back to Bartlesville and rented them an apartment, and I went up on the Alcan. And I had to sign up for 9 months, and I done 2 contracts. I stayed 18 months while I was up there, and I didn't drink much while I was there. So I did save up a little money. And I come back home and got my wife and baby, and we went back to Alaska. I landed in a little town of Cordova. Cordova's population of probably 1,500 people or 2,000 or something like that. And hadn't been there but a short while. There's 3 young Dagos that is trying to go outlaw, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. They just about had the town took over. And they whooped the police chief and throwed him out in the street. Well, he done what any sensible man would do. He quit. And I went in the bar that evening to get my double shot. And I said to the bartender, I said, looks to me like a policeman would carry enough of difference to swap out at them guys. Well, he said, how long have you been here? I said, about a month. He said, imagine you could get the job. So I went upstairs and talked to the mayor. He lived right across the hall from me. He held a council meeting that night, and they hired me. And they gave me a badge and a club and a book of the city ordinances, but I never did get time to read it. And I went to work. And I didn't know no more about being a police chief than a hog does about a side saddle. But I think it is good that I didn't know anything better. About the 3rd night that I was on duty, they started in to throw me out. When the fight is over, I had the handles to a Smith & Wesson left. The rest of it I'd wore out over their heads. I had 1 in jail and another in the hospital, and the 3rd one laying there. I went over and knelt down by the side of him, and I think he thought I was going to pray for him. But I didn't. And I told him, I said, now I brought a wife and kid and come up here, and I ain't got the money to leave, and we can't all live here. Well, they took me at my word. They went on, I heard down to Cook's Inlet and took it, but I don't know. Don't matter anyway. Anyhow, after that, there wasn't any police work to do. I even got to be fire chief, too. I come on up in this world for a while, and didn't have much of anything to do. You didn't have to worry about anybody stealing anything, because if they stole it, they couldn't go nowhere with it. There's just 12 miles of road out of there, and it was a good job. And I think this is where I developed into an alcoholic. If I wasn't born one, I don't know whether I was or not. It don't make no difference to me. I just drank, and every time I'd go in the bar, they'd set me up a drink. And I also had the city equipment that moved the snow and all that stuff, and if I plowed out a man's driveway, they never think about paying you. They just give you a case of whiskey. And I drank it, and enjoyed drinking it for a long time. But I got into quite a few scrapes that wasn't too good. One time they was having a sunrise service out at the lake, and it's Thanksgiving, and they'd rifled off some turkeys, and I'd won 3 live turkeys. And the women went out on the lake to this sunrise gathering, and she brought me the turkeys in a crate and said, put these on the back porch. Well, I was trying to get to the back porch of them turkeys, and they got loose in the lobby. And I couldn't catch them, and I thought about shooting them, and I thought, no, I might ricochet off and kill a drunk. And so I just went upstairs and went to bed, pistol, uniform, and all. That old landlady woke me up the next morning, and she said, what I ought to do is have you arrested. I said, you can't have me arrested. I'm the policeman here. She said, well, there's another one here. I said, well, he's drunk. She said, well, what in hell you think your problem is? But I didn't get in a whole lot of trouble over that. I kind of talked about it for a while and let it go at that. But I just stayed there and drank and drank and drank, and finally got to looking like they was going to fire me, and I quit to save my reputation, you know. And I went back into construction work. By the way, there ain't none of this stuff in the big book that I'm telling you here. Anyhow, I went back into construction. That's what I went up there to do. And I had these two buddies, and the three of us run around together and worked together all the time. One of them's name was Malamute Slim, and the other's name was Slim Jensen.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And there ain't no way to describe either one of them, but I'm going to try to describe old Malamute. Malamute had one eye put out, and he didn't wear no patch over it. He just had a hole in his head. A lot of them totem poles had better looking heads on them than he did. And then there was Slim Jensen. He looked about like him, only he didn't have the hole in the head. And then there was me. And the people often said the three of us made a wonderful pair. And we just drank. And nobody gave us any trouble about it. We just drank and worked, and I thought I was getting along pretty good. And one morning the boss come and got in the truck with me and opened the jockey box and got the bottle out and took a drink and put it back in there. He didn't offer me a drink, and it was my whiskey. And he got back and he said, now, Buttermilk, if I open that jockey box again and find that bottle in there, I'm going to have to run you off. And I said, well, if that's the case, you might as well do it now, because I can't operate without it. He said, you ain't operating very good with it. And I said, I know that. So we decided that I'd quit, that he'd pay my way home. So I did, and he helped me get my tools and clothes together and put them on an airplane, and I was supposed to be in Tulsa in 24 hours. 6 weeks later, I hadn't got to Tulsa. And if I could write a book about trying to get on home. The plane stopped in Great Falls, and I got off. I don't know why. And there was a limousine there, and I thought, well, he's come to get me, so I got in. And we went back into town and parked in front of a big hotel. And when I got out of the limousine, I could hear old Tommy Duncan singing, "Get off, it's the end of the line." And I looked across the street, and Bob Wills was playing a dance over there in the city auditorium or something. And I went over there, and I remember taking a drink or two with them. And then the next thing I knew, I come to in a hotel, and I just figured it was that same hotel where they left me. But I got the key and looked at it, and it said White Sulphur Springs, Montana, and give the name of the hotel. And I thought, my God, when you get to Great Falls, Montana, you can't get out, and there ain't no way to get in there. You're just there. Well, I went downstairs and talked to the desk clerk a while, and he called me Mr. Smith, which I liked. And I couldn't figure out where I was or how come me to be there. And directly I said, well, feller, I got to get out of here. I don't belong here. And I turned around and got about halfway at the door. He said, well, hey, just a minute. He said, don't you want your money? Oh, I said, I'm always forgetting that. So he went and opened the safe and just brought me a handful of money. You couldn't reach around it. It like scared me to death. I said, "Where'd this money come from?" He said, "You mean you don't know?" Well, I said, "If I did, I wouldn't ask you." He said, "Well, you've been here for a week playing poker with them sheep herders out there." Well, that kind of let me know where the money come from and kind of built my ego up to think that I could outsmart a sheep herder. So I said, "Where's the airport?" He said, "There ain't none." Well, I said, "Where's the bus station?" He said, "There ain't none." I said, "How in hell am I going to get out of here?" He said, "Well, how in hell did you get in here?" I said, "I don't know." Well, if you can't get on an airplane or a bus, then one thing to do, and that's to hitchhike. And you can't hitchhike with the bronc stomper's boot on and a dirty sock. It won't work. So I went and bought me some walking shoes and throwed the boots away. And I bought them as big as I could because I wanted the box. And I put my hitchhiking shoes on and went down to the liquor store and bought 3/5 of whiskey. And started in to put them in that shoebox, and it won't work. So what you got to do, you got to drink one and two will fit in there good. So that's what I done, and got it under my arm and took off. And them cars would get up close enough they could see me, they'd speed up. And I had just walked and walked till I couldn't walk any longer. And I looked up, and here come a man in a buggy. They call them Hutterites up there. Here I think they call them Mennonites. And then I'll leave that there and go back. I've heard doctors say that the DTs will kill you in 10 days if you don't get them checked. Well, I don't agree with that. I had the DTs, and I'd had them for 3 years. And I knew what I had, I just didn't know anything to do about it. In fact, I got the damn things when they first come out. If I run out of whiskey and couldn't get it when I needed a drink, well, this old white horse would come up. And if I was in the bed, he'd get in the bed with me. And if I was walking, he'd walk with me. He'd talk to me, and I'd talk to him. We've had some wonderful conversations, me and that horse. But I could take a drink or two, and he'd leave. He wouldn't stay around a drunk. Anyhow, this Mennonite jogged up the side of him and stopped and said, "Would you like to ride?" I said, "I certainly would." And I got in, and we was jogging along, and finally my horse got to jogging along with his. And I stood about as long as I could. I said, "Fella, do you mind if I take a drink?" Well, he said, "Not if you give me one." So we had a drink, and we jogged a little further, and we had another one. And I said, "You don't think it's a sin to drink?" "Oh, no, no." He said, "It's a sin to buy the damn stuff." Well, I don't remember what the outcome of that was. I finally come to in some more places, but I finally come to one morning leaning up again the Fourth National Bank in Bartlesville. Just leaning up against the wall when I come to, seemed like the feller looking for his mule. When he finally found him, all at once, there he was. Anyhow, I looked out in the street, and my sister-in-law was parked out there motioning at me to come on and get in the car. I don't know where they found me. And she took me to the house, and I stayed around there for about 6 weeks drinking, and it was about income tax time, and I had I had 4 brothers at that time, and this one was a little better educated than the rest of us, and he had made out their income tax for a year. So I had him make out mine, and I had paid more federal income tax than either one of them had made. And I was carrying every damn thing I owned in a shoebox. And I hear these people say, I didn't think alcohol was my problem. I knew it was my problem. I just didn't know anything to do about it. I knew if I went and told some doctor that I had a white horse following me around and he couldn't see the horse, he'd lock me up. I'd already been in 2 or 3 jails and hadn't been contented in either one of them. So I didn't want that. But anyhow, I'd got back to Bartlesville and trying to stay with my mother and brother. I had a single brother and he and mother lived together. And I tried living there, and them trying to keep me from drinking was upsetting me, and me drinking was upsetting them. So I really didn't see any use in upsetting everybody, so I just walked off one morning. Went off out the edge of town. There's an old gal had a beer joint out there called Honest John's Cabins. Old Boots, and I never will forget her. So she let me have one of them cabins to sleep in. And her and her customers would keep me in 2 or 3 fifths of whiskey a day, and I just laid out there and drank for 6 weeks. Or that's how long they told me I was there. I don't know how long I was there. Didn't have no clothes to change, just wore the same things every day. And this big brother, Tobe, he raised me, and he liked me. He sent me to the store one time and then moved while I was gone. But anyhow, this old gal told me one day, she said, that brother of yours was by here looking for you. And that made me mad to think they wouldn't leave me alone. I wasn't bothering them. A day or 2 later, she said he was by again, and I got a little madder. Excuse me. I have to keep this. When I talk, my nose runs. I guess you could tell it. I didn't have to tell you that. And anyhow, Boots had kept me in whiskey, and I'd been out there 6 weeks. And Big Tobe, my brother, was the one that raised me, and he was kind of looking for me. And she'd tell me he was by here again, and every time she told me I'd get mad. And she come out one morning before daylight and woke me up and said, now that brother's here, and he's come to get you. I said, I'll whoop him, that's what I'll do. So I jumped out of the bed and puked right quick and jumped into that uniform that is standing there. And I come out all bowed up to whoop Big Tobe. Now Tobe stood 6'5", weighed 225. And when I got close enough that he could see me or smell me, I don't know which one he got first, he started crying. Well, I thought I'd better not whoop a man and him crying, so he got me by the arm, put me in the car. Had a brand new car. I never will forget it. I wouldn't have done that, I don't believe. And I thought he'd take me to his house, but he didn't. He took me to the preacher's house. And this preacher was a radical. Any way he went too far. He couldn't go down the middle. He'd quit stealing hogs and started preaching again. So he got a gallon of ice water and 2 straight chairs and a Bible. And we went out in the front yard and sat down under a little tree in the presence of God and all the neighbors. And he'd read a little scripture and preach a while. I'd drink a little of that ice water and puke a while. And then the horse was laying there looking at me. I mean, it was miserable. And I told him, I said, Jim, if I don't get a drink, I'm going to die. Well, he said, that's all right. I'm a preacher. I can take care of everything. He said, don't worry about it. And so we sat there. And I don't know how long we'd been there. It seemed to me like forever. And this fella drove up out in front in one of them sport model Jeeps. I think they called him a Jeepster. And he bounced out of that. He had a burr haircut and a tweed suit on, a little short feller, and I'd always hated all 3 of them. And he come by and shook hands with me and called me Buttermilk. Shook hands with the preacher and called him by name. I said, yeah, they've snitched on me, and that's one of them little old policemen that's come after me. And what was making me mad about him, he was so damn happy. He'd just bounce around like a button on a back house door, you know. And directly he looked at me and he said, "Feller, you're sick." Well, I said, "That didn't take no damn genius to figure that out." No, I said, "I guess not." He kept watching me. Directly he said, "You're going to have a drink." I said, "Well, tell that preacher that. I already knew it." So he told the preacher, said he's got to have a drink or he's going to go into DTs. And I thought, yeah, I'm already in them, but you don't know it. So he said, whatever you want to do about it. So he jumped in the Jeep, and he wasn't gone but a minute. He come back at the fifth, just walked up and pitched it to me. And I went in one of them riggers and throwed it back out there at him. And he went and got it and twisted the head off of it and handed it back to me. And I get up there, and I couldn't get my head back far enough to get a drink. So he got the preacher to hold me by the hair of the head, and he poured about a third of that whiskey down me. I could swallow pretty good. And he poured about a third of that down me, and I began to kind of come to and got plumb intelligent again. And the horse got up and left. And I guess you think I've waited a long time to say anything about AA. I didn't have nothing to say about it till now. From here on, I'll try to... It don't take me all day to tell you what I know about Alcoholics Anonymous. And anyhow, he looked at me and he said, "Would you consider joining Alcoholics Anonymous?" I said, "Hell, I'd consider joining the Ku Klux Klan if it'd just get people to leave me alone." He said, "Well, I think you've about accomplished that by yourself." And I had. Anyhow, I told him I'd go. I'd have told him I'd go anywhere. I'd have went to Australia if it had got anybody off my back. So he said, "Would you go to a meeting tonight?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." I never had heard of AA. We didn't have it in Alaska when I was up there. Or if we did, they didn't get to me with it. I didn't know there was any such a thing. Well, he said, "We'll be by to get you at 7. I didn't have no clothes. I'd left them on that airplane. Didn't have sense enough to write and tell them to send them to me. They would have, but I didn't know it. So Big Toe loaned me a suit. It's a little too big, but it's better than what I had on. And they got me ready for the meeting. It took the whole family. And about 7 o'clock, 3 of them dudes showed up and put me in that car, and we went to the meeting. And a lot of people say, I don't remember nothing about the first meeting. Hell, I remember it better than I did the one we had last night. Anyhow, got down to this meeting, and there were several of them people that I had drank with when I was younger. And old Andy, he's dead, wouldn't hurt nothing if I mentioned his name anyway, I reckon. A little old pug-nosed Indian, his nose turned right up that way, and he wore one of them 10-gallon hats so he wouldn't drown if it rained. And he come over there and said, "Buttermilk, I've been sober 3 years. I said, "Andy, you ain't never been sober, and besides that, you lie a lot." "No," he said, "that this is the place for you." And I said, "Okay." Anyhow, I remember the speaker just as well as I remember what he said in the suit he had on. He said, "I'm Clancy Lovelace, and I'm an alcoholic." And I thought, well, good God, feller, I might be too, but I ain't going to be advertising it to everybody. But I sat and I listened close, and I liked what I heard. And after it was over, we piled it. All 3 of them went. I reckon they're afraid of me. I don't know. I couldn't have turned one of them over if it had been dead. We started home. We got about halfway home. They said, "Have you ever had the DTs?" "Oh," I said, "nothing like that. I've drank a little too much, but I ain't that bad off." And then it dawned on me, I'm fixing to go back to that preacher. That's where they're taking me. So I told him about this horse. Well, they said, that's what it is. You've got the DT. The hell, I knew what it was. I didn't have to tell them. And they started in telling me all the things they wouldn't do. They said, we ain't going to get your wife to come back. We ain't going to loan you any money. We ain't going to do this. We ain't going to do that. And I got to wonder if there's any damn thing they would do. And finally they said, we will help you sober up, and that's all, Buster. And I said, well, let's do it. They put a window fan in each end of a screened-in porch that is on my brother's house, and they put me in there on a cot. And I don't, if they'd always two would stay there, and if one had to go to work, another one would come, and that's where they sobered me up. And I don't remember them giving me a drink after the first day. They surely did, but I just don't remember. And damn, I wish I'd quit that. They put me on this back porch, and they'd come see me and do whatever they done. I don't know what they done. They gave me a drink the first day, I know. But finally the horse left and stayed gone. One night the room got full of snakes. There's thousands of them. They wasn't poison snakes. I wasn't afraid of them. I just didn't like their looks. And one of them had on glasses. I didn't like that, but couldn't do nothing about it. So that's where they sobered me up. And that's the first I knew of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this was in 1951, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Anyhow, we got to going to meetings and having fun, and they'd give me a book and told me to read it, which I read enough of it to get in an argument with somebody and didn't try to learn anything of it. Anyhow, I'd been sober about 90 days, and we was going everywhere. I was making talks. I went over to Pawhuska and delivered a message that may outlive the Gettysburg Address. And then got drunk the next day. Old Seth T. Bradley was sitting there on the front row looking right straight up at me, saying, that's gospel, brother. And Seth didn't know that I got drunk, so he stayed sober. I didn't know it for 10 years later. I stayed out there and drank and done all of these things that alcoholics do for another 10 years. And I finally made my way back to Bartlesville. And I went to see one of them fellas that set up with me when I was drying out before. And it was dark when I got there, and I knocked on the door, and he said, who is it? And I said, it's Buttermilk Smith. And he said, what do you want? I said, I want to talk. He said, well, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you. He said, go on, leave me alone. I don't want nothing to do with you. I said, well, I'm going to lay down here on the porch, and I'll get you in the morning. So he got up and put on a robe and come out there, and he called me everything but Buttermilk. And he said, now I'm going to tell you one more time about this thing. He said, I sobered up this way, and I've known about 50 people that did, and I've read about 100 people that did. And he said, there ain't no 2 or 3 ways. There's one way for an alcoholic to sober up and be happy. And he said, now, if I was you, I'd go down here under the bridge or somewhere, wherever you're staying, and get down by a bridge abutment and try to fence everything out, get God to help you and see if you can't figure out a way to quit drinking alcohol. Well, praying wasn't nothing new to me. I'd prayed all of my life for this, that, and the other thing. I fell off of a shrimp boat down in the Gulf of Mexico one time. And when I come up and got that salt water blow down to my nose, I said, God help me out of this frog pond. And 2 or 3 hours later, I got out. And that's kind of like the fella up in Alaska that is sitting in the bar cussing and raving, and he said, I don't believe this thing about this God thing. He said, my sled turned over and broke my leg, and I was laying up there in that snow, I died, and I prayed and prayed and prayed, and nothing ever happened. So I said I went off to sleep. And said pretty soon an Eskimo come by on a dog sled and throwed me on it and brought me to town. So that's kind of the way I was about God. I had prayed all of my life for this, that, and the other thing. But after talking to Tom, he said, now, that's your choice and the only choice. There ain't a dozen. So I went back out to my brother's house. He finally let me in. He didn't want to. And as I said, I'd prayed a lot of times to quit drinking and didn't do no good. I'd wake up the next morning and want to drink. This night, I prayed all night to God to remove the compulsion to drink, to take the craving away from me that I had so dear. I could be looking through a magazine when I was in my dry spells and see a picture of a magazine, and I'd get to slobber until I couldn't talk looking at that picture of whiskey. So that's how bad I was hooked on it, and that's what I had to do to get over it. And if there's anybody here that's new, I'd advise you to get through the first 5 steps as soon as you can, because I think they claim 80% of the slips are caused from people that didn't take a 5th step. And AA's been my life. I haven't done much of anything since that but go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and parties and what have you. I've learned, I've got acquainted with a lot of people all over the United States. And it's been a pretty good life for us since that. I married Pauline after I'd been sober about 3 years. That first wife I had, I scared her damn near to death one time. She was bitching at me about my drinking, and I said, if you don't quit bitching about my drinking, I'm going to leave home. And the next day she wrapped my lunch up in a road map. I'm about to run out of anything to do. I think I'll tell another story. I like to tell stories. I like to tell stories when my nose don't run. This story is about a midget logger. And this midget rolled into a logging camp out in Oregon, and they said, where's the logging boss? They pointed him out, a 6'6" Swede, weighed about 280. He went over and jerked on this Swede's breeches leg. He looked down at him. The little fellow looked up and he said, are you the logging boss? He said, well, yes, what about it? Well, he said, I'm a logger and I want a job. Oh, he said, get the hell out of here. We don't hire midgets, we hire loggers. He said, I didn't come here to get a job as a midget, I come to get a job as a logger. And I'm a good logger and I want a job. Well, to get rid of him, he throwed him about a 5 or 6 pound chopping axe. And there's a hemlock over there about 5 foot on the stump. He said, jump on that hemlock and see what you can do. He went on about his business. I thought that'll hold him all day. And it wasn't but just a few minutes till he hollered, timber! That's the way midgets talk. He hollered, timber! And he looked up and here come that hemlock. Well, he thought surely he had a logger head out there or something. So looked around and there's a bull pine about the same size of it. He said, jump on that bull pine. And he jumped on that and the chips were just a flying every which way. It wasn't just a few minutes till he hollered, timber! And here come that bull pine. Well, he said, little man, that beats any damn thing I ever seen. And he said, I was raised in the timber and I never seen a man could chop like that. He said, how'd you do it? Well, he said, when I was a little feller, he said, my daddy used to take me into that Mojave forest and we chopped trees all day till way after dark, day after day, week after week. And he said, if you do anything long enough, you get good at it. Well, yeah, but he said, you or me, one's kind of mixed up. He said, I've always thought of the Mojave as being a desert. He said, well, hell, it is now. I got to tell Chuck Bees out there. Chuck gave me this story several years ago, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And seems this feller had a buddy by the name of Artie. And I think Artie had all of his marbles, but his shooter was messed up. And this feller also had one of them nagging wives. One day he asked old Artie, he said, Art, what did you charge me to kill my wife? And he thought about it a few minutes, and he said, oh, $1. He said, you mean you'd kill a woman for $1? Well, he said, not just any woman, but he said, you're my friend, I'm trying to do you a favor. Well, he said, I'll tell you, he said, my wife works at the warehouse market, and she gets off at 10 o'clock at night. If you'll be out there, you can strangle her when she comes out. So Artie went out there and hid, and when she come out, she had 3 more women with her. Well, he either had to strangle all 3 or just give up, so he tried for all 3. Anyhow, the next day when the newspaper come out, the headlines read, Artie chokes 3 for $1 at the warehouse market. I want to thank you people for staying with me. This has been a rough go, but I've enjoyed it, and I think I'll just go away. God bless.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.